they've both got a particular set of skills. On this week's GTA 6 o'clock, the crystal ball of Trailer 3 dates, like it's pretty much set in stone. GTA 6's NPC system, even if you accidentally went in and shot everyone there, might cause you some gameplay problems. And how will Jason and Lucia interact off mission? How Rockstar handles that Bonnie and Clyde dual protagonist thing in GTA 6 with Jason and Lucia, I think is going to be a completely different thing. It's all here on this week's GTA 6 o'clock. Hello, welcome to episode 134 of GTA 6 o'clock, the world's most in-depth and best connected GTA 6 show. And in the week where Take-Two filed its official proxy statement confirming once again that GTA 6 is coming November 19th, I am here to talk about all the latest, hottest info, rumours, and speculation about GTA 6 and Rockstar Games. If you're new here, you can subscribe, and if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, there's a video version of this show you can find by going to YouTube and searching for GTA 6 o'clock. I am your host, James JJ Jarvis, and regular listeners will realise that it is just me today. Normally, it would be me and Dan, but Dan is off on, you guessed it, yet another holiday. So, as is the case with these solo episodes, this one's probably going to be slightly shorter than a regular one. There is 16 weeks to go until the launch of GTA 6, or 16 episodes of this very show. That is just 113 days. We are 9 days out from the Take-Two investor call, which is happening early August. And here I am holding down the fort. But what I will say is this is it, everybody. This is the last investor call where Take-Two and or Rockstar would be able to announce anything that is going to affect the launch of GTA 6 coming on November 19th. Or, say that the game is definitely still on track, etc., etc. There isn't really another investor call until November. By that point, we'll be right on release day. So I will say this, GTA 6 is coming November 19th. And Trailer 3 will come in August. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You were thinking that if you were listening a few episodes ago, I said I would be very surprised if we didn't get Trailer 3 in July. Well, here we are at the end of July, no Trailer 3. Am I very surprised? Yes. Yes, I am. But does that mean that me saying it's coming in August is going to change anything? No. I think it is coming in August, and I can keep saying this, obviously, until we get through August, and then September, and then October. But August feels now like it's pretty much set in stone as when we're going to get the next content drop for something GTA 6 related. I think it has to come before Gamescom. Does it have to come before the next investor call? No, but it would make sense if that did happen. But we can look at what I'm calling the crystal ball of release dates because Dan isn't here and I think it's fun. So that's what we're going to do. Tuesday, August the 4th, that is next week, is a pretty strong possibility. It's the first Tuesday of the month. Now, this matches when Rockstar have traditionally released the previous trailers for GTA 6. It has been the first Tuesday of the month. Do you want to read into that? There is a little spanner in the works that we might get some Red Dead Online news at the beginning of the month. But hey, you can just push that back. That's going to be totally fine. Then you look at August 6th. Now, this is possible, it is a Thursday, but it is very close to the Take-Two earnings call, which is on Friday, August 7th. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I think putting the trailer out the day before the investor call gives you quite a lot of things to go into that call to talk about. You can reconfirm the release date yet again. You can talk a little bit about pre-orders because we know there's going to be a small amount of data that they're going to have in the window that they're talking about financially that does cover the GTA 6 pre-orders. There's only by a few days, and they're not obliged to mention anything about it, as we've said before. And yes, as we've said before, pre-order numbers don't actually mean anything to them financially until all of that money becomes real. As many people as they want can pre-order the game. It doesn't actually mean that they can't cancel it or that any of that money is guaranteed in the bank. It's a good indication, but not guaranteed. So they can talk a little bit about that. And if trailer 3 doesn't come out before the investor call and they don't really go in depth on pre-orders, there are going to be a lot of questions from those investors about GTA, the state of the game, when it's coming, etc., etc. So it would make sense for them to cover off all of those bridges, release trailer 3, pre-order now, coming November 19th, tick, tick, tick. Everybody is happy. We are especially happy because it means that next week we would have quite a lot of things to talk about. If you look a bit further into August, you've got August the 11th and August the 18th, both good contenders. I've just merely picked them out because they are a Tuesday, but those are pretty good dates as well, still before Gamescom, still makes sense to me. But all of this means that it is possible that next week's episode is going to be quite a special one. Or, in even better news for you guys, you might get 2 episodes. A regular episode on the Wednesday, followed by a special report, our first reaction to the trailer on Thursday or Friday. Plenty to get excited about, of course. So even if we don't get a trailer next week, we'll be really close to there being just 100 days to go until the release of GTA 6. Would I like to see more info on the game? Yes, I would. So let's all cross our fingers and hope that next week we've got lots of things to talk about. Now, just the other day on our X account, GTA V O'Clock, please get in touch. We asked you to submit questions that you wanted us to cover. You can also get in touch with us via email, by the way, gtavio'clock@gmail.com. So I'm going to dive into a couple of those questions now, and because Dan isn't here, these answers will now become GTA 6 o'clock facts. First up, we got a huge number of questions about NPCs. Rockstation says, just fascinated by how the NPC system will work and how alive the world will be. I know it's pretty standard, but I just can't stop thinking about it. Join the Future said, biggest question of immersion, in my opinion, is how well the memory persistence throughout the different subsystems is organized. Like how well is environmental social state preserved through play sessions? How immersive will non-scripted events feel, evolving over time versus performance? Shadow D says, how will the interaction system be with the NPCs? And Paul, finally, can the world genuinely function without the player? If I ignore the story for weeks, will NPCs, businesses, gangs, and the economy continue to evolve, or is it most of the world waiting for me to trigger events? Those were just a few of the very similar questions that we got regarding NPCs. Thank you all for getting in touch. There were, of course, loads more of you. And look, this is one of the biggest topics, I think, surrounding GTA games as a whole, but specifically GTA 6 is NPC interaction and how that is all going to work based on what you as a player do in the world. We've covered this quite a lot on the show before, and the short answer is yes. NPCs are going to make the world feel alive. As Rockstation says, I know it's pretty standard. It's something that we've come to expect from Rockstar and from GTA games. The biggest question I think that this raises is, as Join the Future says, the idea of memory persistence in the world and just how extensive that is going to be. We've seen some of these systems in place before with Red Dead, where you can go into a saloon, you can shoot somebody, the shopkeeper, and then when you return, they will say, we don't want any more trouble here next time you come in. But then basically it goes back to being business as usual. Like you can still interact with everybody. It's just a throwaway comment. You would think that in the years that have passed since Red Dead Redemption 2 to GTA 6, that Rockstar want to expand on that system and really add in memories as much as possible. We've seen other games doing this, and I know of other games that are doing this in 2026, 2027, where some of the things that you do in the world have a genuine impact on your interaction with it and how all of that stuff works. For example, GTA 6, you go to rob a convenience store. It's quite easy to rob that convenience store, but when you come back the next day, maybe that store is closed for a certain amount of time. Maybe that person doesn't work there anymore or can't go back to work. Maybe you don't ever see that person again. Or maybe the shop is never open again. That would be quite the stretch, I think, to be able to close off all of those businesses, even if you accidentally went in and shot everyone there. To then not have access to those places might cause you some gameplay problems. But I think that idea of memory persistence, like even if you just rob the shop without actually physically hurting anyone, you just hold it up with your gun. If you go back to that shop the next day, I think it's pretty likely that those characters, those NPCs who are always in the shop, have some memory of you being in there and holding it up the day before. Maybe they don't serve you. Maybe they instantly call the police. Maybe they hit a panic button, depending on if it's a shop, a bank, etc., etc. But I think that real world interaction and memory with how you interact with the world is going to change significantly in GTA 6. That's what I'd like to happen anyway. It might be that the world is too big and dense to have all of those people remember all of those things. But even if it was just for 24 hours, and if you went back the next day, something would happen that would trigger a memory, and you'd be like, oh, I actually need to avoid that place because they know who I am. Like we talked about a few weeks ago, if you go bigger and you do a heist, maybe a whole section of the community then is more alert and more on the lookout for your certain car or the color of your car, meaning that you have to think a lot more about what you're doing in the world and what the consequences of your actions are going to be by doing those things. It makes it a lot more like a simulation than I think we've ever had in a GTA game before, like a lot more like a sandbox that you are totally free to go and play in and do whatever you like. But if you do go off and do nefarious things, there are going to be consequences to those actions. Now, if Dan were here, he would say that's all well and good, but how do you balance that with gameplay? Whereas traditionally, every now and then you want to let off steam in a GTA game, right? You've done a few missions, you want to wander around the world, you want to cause some havoc. How do you balance the opportunity with being able to cause havoc with a kind of inbuilt memory system in the world? That is a question that only Rockstar can hopefully answer. And I think there are ways to do it. Like you could possibly lock that memory system into missions. Certain things that you do on those missions are going to have persistent memories with those characters. That's just storytelling. That's how that works. But perhaps there are some side missions that you can do, some of the Stranger and Freak stuff, some of the investigative stuff, some of the secrets and things that you can find. Some of that stuff could start to bleed into the world. And you could start to hear reports of, let's say, you go off into the Everglades and you find an absolutely huge alligator. There is a chance then that as you're driving around in the city, you'll hear radio reports of somebody finding a huge alligator, or at least there's been a sighting of a huge alligator, or even somebody has killed the biggest alligator we've ever seen in the state of Leonida. All of that stuff would come together to make the world feel really alive. And it's something that other games have done before. Like you can go into shops and rob them or take out the shopkeeper, and then that would have an effect on how you interacted with that environment or with that shop as you went forward into the game. It's something that I think I'm really excited about. We've seen the patents as well that Rockstar have filed in terms of how NPCs react to you in certain environments, if you're like looking wounded or if you're smart, if you've got scruffy clothes on. All of these things can come together to trigger certain points within Rockstar's systems that could make NPCs react to you in a different way. And I think it's going to make the world feel really alive. On Paul's point of can the world genuinely function without the player, I think this is a yes and no thing. I think you can ignore the story for weeks and NPCs, businesses, gangs will continue to go about their business, but will it actually evolve and the world change if you don't do anything? I think that's much harder to do. I fully expect the world to evolve as you play through the story and start doing certain key mission beats. I think that is something that we've seen before. We've seen it in Red Dead. We saw it in previous GTAs. That's definitely going to happen. Buildings will get constructed. Neighborhoods will change. Certain shops will open and close. You might see different areas becoming more or less affluent. You might see different people walking around certain sections of the city that you weren't there before. All of that stuff, I think, will continue to change throughout the game. If you don't touch the world and you just basically become a passive bystander, I think the world will go about its business in the way you would expect it to. People you would be able to watch go to work, go back home again, like do that daily commute. You'd see construction workers working on a building. Will that building actually be constructed if you don't do anything? I think that's much harder to do in a game world type of thing, because then you really are putting a set amount of time that everything happens. And what happens if you don't do anything and then just leave it on its own for a few months? Everything gets built, and then you're at a state where you need, possibly for story beats, some of those things to not have happened yet until you come along and do something, and then that physically changes the neighborhood or the shops or the construction of the building or the gang affiliation, etc., etc. So I think a living, breathing world is definitely where we're going, but I think you are going to have to interact with it in some way as a player to move it forward. Another question that we got this week came from Lloyd via Twitter, who said GTA 5 had 3 protagonists that felt fairly isolated until heists. How do you think Rockstar handles the Bonnie and Clyde dual protagonist dynamic in GTA 6 without making switching feel like a gimmick? And I think this is an interesting thing to cover here because, as Lloyd said, in GTA 5, certainly at the beginning of the game, the 3 characters felt very distinct, but separate in the way that they were living in the city. You had 3 different introduction points. It was a great way of showing you the different areas of the map and the types of people and shops that you would find in those certain locations. And it got you some great views, especially as you were Trevor and you drove all the way into Los Santos. How Rockstar handles that Bonnie and Clyde dual protagonist thing in GTA 6 with Jason and Lucia, I think is going to be a completely different thing. We know that Jason and Lucia are going to spend a lot of time together in this game. It is much more of a story about those 2 characters as protagonists than maybe GTA 5 was. GTA 5, you would argue, was Michael's story. You saw him at the very beginning of the game in North Yankton doing all of the things that led up to basically the start of when you were in Los Santos, and then you followed Michael through the story as he interacted with Trevor from the past and then met Franklin and formed a new bonds with those people. Jason and Lucia, I think, are going to have been friends. I think this isn't a fact, or at least acquaintances from quite early on in their lives. We know then something happens and Lucia ends up in jail. Jason then goes to meet her as she leaves jail, and then I think they go on this journey together. But as I've said many times on the show before, I've got a sense that that is not the first time that they are meeting. There could have been some interaction with them when they were much younger. Then they maybe grew apart. Lucia's time in prison might have had something to do with that. And then they get back together again. This is very much a story about these 2 characters and them together as a crime-doing couple. I was going to say crime-fighting, but they're definitely not fighting any crime. As a criminal couple, right? They both want a different way of life than the one that they're currently living. They both have different ideas about how to get there, but ultimately they both want the same thing. They both want to be having a nice life, be rich, and not have to worry about too much. It's a different story than what Michael, Trevor, and Franklin were going through. And it's very much, I think, going to be a story about them. And as we've mentioned before, if Dan was here, he'd be saying trust. It's a trust between those 2 people as characters. It's a trust between them and everybody else in the world. How does that relate to then character switching? Well, I think most of the time, those characters are going to be together for a lot of the missions. Michael, Trevor, and Franklin came together for heists, as Lloyd says. But I think these 2 are going to spend a lot more time together and be able to roam around the world together. I remember GTA 5, it became quite the thing to try and get all 3 characters, close together and be able to switch between them and make them walk past each other, etc., etc. I think in this game, unless you choose or the game wants you / makes you leave one of them behind, you're going to be spending a lot more time with both of them. It might be that in Free Roam, Jason and Lucia come together as a package. Like they both get in the car Does one of them help you out if you're doing a rampage? It's much more of a dual protagonist thing that I think we haven't seen before. And then being so closely connected helps with that kind of thing. I am sure if you didn't want to do that, there'd be a way to say, hey, Jason, I'm going off on my own today. You just stay in the house. And then the character switching becomes from whatever you're doing as Lucia back to Jason, and then you go off and do things. I also think you will be able to take both of them with you and go and do whatever free roam activities you want. Could you then instruct one of them to just stay in the car? Yeah, probably. But having a companion follow you around would be a brand new thing for GTA 6. And I think something that would totally work. Dan would probably sit here and go, oh, I don't want someone following me around and getting in the way and blowing stuff up when I didn't really want to blow stuff up. But I think there's definitely systems that you could put in place to make that good from a gameplay point of view. So the character switching then becomes, what different abilities do they have? What do you want to do when you're doing free roam? Does one of them have, for instance, better diving abilities? So if you want to go and find some secrets in the Everglades, both of them can come, but you would then select Jason, for example, to go around and swim around looking for treasure. If you needed to go and get some of the classic cars, is Lucia better at breaking into cars or locations, and therefore you need to use her to do that kind of stuff? I think it would give them both much more purpose in the world to have them have different abilities for different sets. You know, they've both got a particular set of skills. But that would be great. And I think it would really make you think about who you were using in the world and what you wanted them to do. The other side of that is, could you just go on a massive rampage and it be fun still? Yes. There's no way that is not going to be the case. But it does feel like giving them something that grounds them into the game, it grounds them into that environment. It's just another step in that kind of open world, sandbox, living environment that you are interacting in, and it feels like you'll have a much more freedom. You'll be able to do what you want and see how that affects the world. That could be really exciting. So hopefully, Lloyd, that answers your question. As I said, these all are now facts because Dan isn't here to counter it. So that's what we're going with. I think for this week, as we all get excited about next week, we are going to wrap it up here. I'm sorry it's a shorter episode than perhaps we have had in the past, but you can get in touch with us on Twitter at GTAVOclock or via email gtaviclock@gmail.com. As I said, Dan and Nathan are away right now, but they are back next week. And next week could be, I know we've said this a lot, a really good week for the show and for everyone's excitement about GTA 6. If not next week, maybe the one after or the one after that. But hey, let's wait and see. Lots to discuss before then, obviously. Thank you all for watching. If you've enjoyed it, let us know in the comments below. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. It does really help us out. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, just give us a review. 5 stars if you like, 4 stars, totally up to you. But some stars would be nice. There's no newsletter this week, but if you want to stay up to date with everything from the show in text form, you can sign up by going to gamesradar.com/newsletter. Me and Dan will be back next week. I'm off to pray for the release of Trailer 3, and we will be here next Wednesday, 6 o'clock, for another episode of GTA 6 o'clock.